I'm going to jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to Northwestern and what you ended up doing after that? Sorry, that was two big questions. So first, how did you get to Northwestern? And then we'll keep going from there.
Sure. Going back in history. Yeah, so I actually did a summer camp at Northwestern the summer before my senior year in high school. Really loved it. Actually took economics for the first time, and that's honestly how I decided on college. I'm from Indiana, not too far from home, far enough that my parents won't visit me every single weekend or request that I visit them every single weekend, but close enough that I can visit. But yeah, really enjoyed all 4 years there, and so decided to continue the economics journey. And I know Mark is also here, so very happy to have been involved with the FET challenge and just all the econ classes at Northwestern. And afterwards, I decided to actually did my Fulbright right after college. So I studied abroad at the LSE, so London School of Economics, in my third year. Was exposed to development economics, became very passionate about microfinance, decided to do microfinance research in China and help with poverty alleviation in emerging markets. So did Fulbright in the year after I graduated, and I did apply to a number of banks, during my senior year. So, basically did kind of your microfinance research and the hardcore finance in investment banking in New York right after I graduated.
Great, thank you very much. I think a lot of people end up coming to Northwestern through those summer camps, so good marketing strategy for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so then a little bit more about your time at Northwestern. As you know, the saying goes, and is in our DNA. You studied MMSS, Econ, and German. How did you come across those programs, and what do you remember most vividly about that experience?
Yeah, so I am still very bullish on the MMSS program. It's very quant driven, so I think it's just a really good skill set for anyone who's doing social sciences. I actually, I guess, originally wanted to become to be in academia, so decided to do MMSS because of the quantitative analytical training. Ended up in banking because I think I just somehow got exposed to finance and became very interested. But I would say that, it's a really great program for, doesn't even matter what you want to do. I think it's just great training. I'm all about having a lot of interest and developing, my interests. So I didn't want to just be, focus on math or econ or social science in general. I, always had an interest in exploring different languages and cultures, and German is the language I took in high school. Decided to just keep the language skills as well. I also speak Mandarin, so I'm definitely very bullish on taking different languages. And then really had great opportunities to travel abroad. I studied abroad in Germany for 2 summers. Loved it, and also recommend study abroad for any students. Very much an eye-opening experience, changed my perspectives in many ways, and met a lot of great friends. So yeah, I guess I wanted a more well-rounded experience, and also coursework.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know Northwestern does a good job of encouraging that well-roundedness. So glad to hear that. Kind of sticking with the theme of time at Northwestern, were there any classes that particularly stand out to you as being favorites? I don't know if I should ask about least favorites, but any favorites out there?
Gosh, there's a number of classes that I thought were, well, I guess depends on the perspective you're going for. Like, there's really great classes, just foundational classes that are good training. So I would say, I think any of the MMSS classes, not all of them are my favorites. And I think at the time, I probably didn't really enjoy a good number just because of the intensity. And not to say that it's like not good, but it's very just great training, a lot of work, but you just you get what you put in. So really good skill building. I would say I can't remember all the names for the classes, but I do remember most of the classes being just like great training, very analytical. Let's see, I do remember, I don't know, is Eric Stahl still around? Okay, so he, the economics courses I took from him, I definitely remembered and thought were quite useful in terms of just the way that I thought about the world, how monetary markets work, financial markets work, economics work. Just some, those are all foundational classes. I also took some random classes that I thought were interesting, like art history. I would definitely encourage anyone to take full advantage of liberal arts education, not just limiting themselves to one area. I really enjoyed all the German classes I took, and I enjoyed some of the history classes I took. So glad I didn't just focus on one major.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think definitely a lot of benefits to that, as you said. Unfortunately, I'm a senior, so I can't take more classes, but hopefully our younger econ students can learn from that and take a broad range of things during their time here. So
most people and my friends who did not study abroad in college regretted it. So
I didn't get a chance to either, but yes, everyone else can learn from my mistakes. I wanted to ask if you, was going off script a little bit, but if you took Eric Schultz's class, I think it was 310-1, he made us all sing, and so that was a very memorable experience for me. I'm not sure if you had the same.
Either I don't, maybe it was so painful that I blocked it out, or I didn't get to experience it. But glad that he's adding that to the curriculum.
Yeah, it was a very memorable experience. We'll never forget about monopsony power again. So let's see. A couple more questions more about Northwestern. I guess, well, I'm going to jump around a little bit here. On the subject of being an econ major, do you have any advice for aspiring econ majors who are maybe curious about the field but haven't really explored it yet?
Yeah, so I think economics is just a really great foundational I guess major to have. It can easily apply it to any job out there, and of course with any job anyone takes, there's a lot of things to be learned on the job. So people might not think, oh, I am applying all the skill sets, all the knowledge base I learned from my classes directly, but I do think that just having an understanding of how the world works, having an understanding of how markets, economics works, it's super helpful in terms of thinking about, say, if you want, I did investing afterwards. So even thinking about, investing in the financial markets or investing in general with my time, with my resources, I think economics comes in handy. So having just that foundation is super helpful. And then when I think about taking classes, I don't just think about the knowledge and the core knowledge itself. I think about the skill sets you build, and it's really learning about how to learn, not necessarily learning about the facts. So I would be more mindful of just, maybe it's like in the coursework you do or homework you do, like think about maybe like smarter ways to learn. I'm all about like not necessarily just like doing whatever's been assigned, but asking the whys and thinking about kind of longer term what's more useful, what's more applicable. And I tend to go for courses in that sense, aside from like just interest-based courses. If I really want to learn about art history, I'll take a class on that. But a lot of times it's really based on training and skill sets.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So kind of shifting away from Northwestern a little bit toward your first steps out of college, how do you feel that your time at Northwestern prepared you for, if I understand correctly, you were at Orbis Pincus first out of college, and then
So I spent 2 years at Morgan Stanley, like literally
okay.
right around the financial crisis. So that was an
Mhm.
interesting time to work for a large investment bank, especially as all the banks start to disappear. And then I spent 2 years at Warburg Pincus started with more late stage investments, and then went on to do more early stage as well.
Got it. And how do you think that the Northwestern Econ education that you received kind of prepared you for those roles?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the training. So I think it's really about, learning, having learned to learn quickly and pick up new skills quickly. I think that was super helpful because I would say, like, from a knowledge-based perspective, very few people will like apply what they learn in college to their first job. And you'll learn everything on the job. I think it's really crucial to build that base, the core foundational skills. Even when it comes to reading comprehension, I think people like sometimes undervalue that, and they just can assume everyone can read. But being able to take a lot of information and synthesize that information and analyze it and make decisions on that, it's actually pretty key for a lot of different jobs. And having a good understanding of how markets work, how the economy works is actually pretty crucial in any job. It might not be obvious now, but I think about the things that are the most useful for me are always the skill sets that can be applied to any job later on. And I think just having rigorous training in college has been super helpful. And I wouldn't say I learned anything like accounting or finance related. Northwestern isn't like business. It's not so focused on business. I took a lot of business courses, but I do think that having a pretty basic level of skill sets and the ability to pick up things quickly is pretty key.
Great, thank you. Good to know that we're being prepared for that kind of learning experience in the future. So kind of going toward your entrepreneurial experience, I think that's been a really big part of your career so far. I was curious what drew you to this, how you got started, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've always wanted to work on something I'm personally passionate about. So I am a huge foodie, and I feel like that's just a big part of my life. And I wanted to, contribute very positively to the food system. And, maybe it's from the perspective of enabling people to consume better, healthier, and this could be also from the perspective of adding more diversity to retail shelves, to just the food system in general. And so I decided to first start a loose leaf teas and herbs business that, then turned into a beverage business based on consumer feedback. A lot of the corporate office customers I was servicing started asking for more convenient formats of delivering the same health benefits. So yeah, it's kind of a constant iteration based on what people want and based on demand. And we're still, launching new products, expanding to new channels based on consumer demand. So yeah, I would say, it probably didn't really make sense from, just if you look at my resume, I did finance and investing. But when I was in investing at Warburg, I worked a lot with early stage companies and was just fascinated by the growth stage and launching cool products that help people in a certain way. Decided to go to Stanford to explore the operating side, and the Valley has a lot of startups launching here, and there's just the culture is quite different than maybe elsewhere in the country. So a lot of people are very entrepreneurial around me, and maybe I was inspired to kind of follow their footsteps, and yeah, do something myself. So far, I've been enjoying it. So maybe ask me in 5 or 10 years and see where I am.
Sounds good. We can have a follow-up and see if anything has changed at that point. I guess kind of on that note, what do you think has been the biggest challenge so far?
In building my business?
Yes.
I would say, I mean, everything has been challenging. It's a very different skill set to build a business because I had to think about every aspect of the business. So from hiring to operations to sales to marketing to product development to fundraising. So I was on the other side, like providing the capital, and now I'm asking for capital. So that's also a very different skill set. So the challenge is actually being able to I guess be more of a generalist, but know how to hire, because the job of a CEO is basically fundraising and recruiting. And I started with really running the business myself. So I developed the product myself, I did the ops myself, I did the sales and marketing myself. Now I'm at a point of hiring other people to do it, while still having a base understanding of how to identify the good talent. So as I would say, it's kind of being able to think about everything all together, while still kind of doing my job of managing and inspiring people, hiring the right talent, and bringing enough capital to fund the business and allowing other people to do their jobs. So it's not so focused on one area, and it's a lot more stressful from that perspective because I can't just think about one thing. I have to think about everything all together.
Yeah, I can imagine that that's a very difficult part of the process. And like you were saying before, it sounds like, the Northwestern background can kind of prepare you for some of the more technical side of things, but also the thinking critically and how to work with people and groups and things like that. Kind of on the management side of things, one of the questions we got from one of our attendees was, how did you meet your wildwonder team? How did you kind of build that from scratch especially after doing everything yourself for a while?
Yeah, so maybe people will be surprised to hear that I have a very small team. It's a team of 2. So we were able to actually do a lot with just 2 people. And we do have a lot of team members that aren't full-time. So we work with different design team, development team, sales and marketing can somewhat be outsourced. Right now, we are actually hiring more full-time folks to join the team as we are expanding regionally, more sales and marketing roles. So in terms of hiring, it really is so important. It doesn't matter what stage of the company is. I'm starting to really appreciate like one person significantly influences the culture and just the performance of the business. My current, for example, full-time operations manager is someone that was recommended to me through an advisor. And for everyone I've worked with full-time, I've actually started with part-time. So I would do a project with them, maybe it's through an internship, maybe it's through just a part-time work contract, and see if it's fit for both sides. Because if someone doesn't find the culture or the work a good fit for them, they wouldn't be able to enjoy it and they wouldn't be able to put in their 100%. So that to me is actually very important, that they actually enjoy the job as well. So I usually start with some sort of trial period and project, and then roll them into a full-time position if that's something that is ideal for both sides.
That makes a lot of sense. In terms of that, I think that's definitely an important decision to keep the team small and that sort of thing. Could you speak a little bit about some of the other considerations for you building the team and building the brand? What are the things that you're thinking about as you move forward in that process?
Yeah, so I think those are pretty different things. So in terms of building the team, I think a lot about culture. And that's something that, the culture tends to be very much defined by the founder. And, I tend to hire, there's kind of a term in psychology called similarity attraction, right? You hire people who are like you. I'm trying to be more mindful of, maybe certain heuristics, and people tend to hire other people who are like them, not necessarily in the best way, while having the goal of keeping a diverse team, I do want to make sure the culture really fits. So someone who, is really resourceful, scrappy, and that's something I care about. And I don't care as much about diploma, past experience. I care more about attitude, and the ability to learn and passion for the product and the space. So, and that's how I've generally hired. I don't care if someone's more junior with less experience, as long as they're willing to learn and they're willing to hustle. And in terms of building a brand, that's something that's quite different. We think about what the brand stands for, and our mission is to really create everyday wonders and for those undervoiced in our community. So the mission part is actually very core to the DNA of the brand. And we tend to work with organizations that have aligned missions. So we actually worked with all female and diverse creatives in building the brand in like every part of the work. Every time we need creative work, we make sure that the people we work with also follow a certain set of standards and reflect certain values that we uphold. And in terms of the products we launch, is all about making wellness more accessible. And we're constantly thinking about what's the best way to do that, and what are the based on our customer needs, what are the best products and best flavors to launch.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. As someone who has not launched a brand, I don't quite understand all the differences between the two. So thank you for explaining that. One thing that I was also curious about, especially with a team that size, what is it like being your own boss on a daily basis?
There's definitely pros and cons to that, as with everything. A lot of people think it's so great to not have to report to someone, and sometimes I wish someone can just tell me what to do. So it's a fine balance, like I do like the flexibility and the control of my own schedule. At the same time, there's a lot of responsibility, right? Everything's kind of on my shoulder, so I don't necessarily have someone to share the burden with. I mean, I've shared with my team, but at the end of the day, I still have to make the call on certain hard choices. So I would say it's busy, but not in the sense that it's just busy work. It's a lot of like mental and emotional energy that's involved in building a business.
Thank you. Just looking through my list of questions, some of the things we got submissions on as well. Someone asked about the biggest struggle that you had when deciding and following your desired career path. I think that's something you've kind of touched on a little bit, but wondering specifically if there were any challenges in the transition from finance to entrepreneurship or anything like that.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of challenges. I would think during business school, so there's a number of things I did that were helpful. So I would say for students who are trying to figure out what to do, or trying to maybe explore a different path than what they had intended, it's really good experience to try it in at a small scale. So what I mean by that is, during my time at Stanford, I pretty much just offered free labor to startups, and that was my way of getting exposed to a certain job or certain startup environment. So I basically worked with a number of consumer brands on the side during my summer, and just to learn and just to see if that's the right environment for me, and realize, hey, I do like the startup environment. I do like just the growth stage, and the lack of structure actually works really well for me. And some people realize the opposite, right? Like I have friends who came from private equity, almost the exact same job I did, and we would go to these startups, do an internship with them, work together, and made very different decisions. And that friend went back to private equity after he realized that startup is not really for him, and I decided to do something different. So I think trying it yourself is just super helpful to kind of see, the chaos and the excitement around, and maybe that's not for everyone. I definitely think that in the startup world, there's the people that will survive the best are the people who are comfortable with lack of structure, and people who like structure might want to have maybe work at a bigger startup or like a more established organization. So it really just, I worked with people who haven't really done startups, and they're quite surprised by what they got themselves into. So maybe just, like do an internship or talk to people who have done it, made the transition, just to get more perspectives and more information.
That's really good to know. Thank you. Kind of on that note, we've got a couple more questions for you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So a lot of being an entrepreneur is about having ideas and kind of taking a chance on those ideas. As you mentioned, it can be very chaotic in a way. How do you keep yourself creative, and what keeps you confident while you're taking risks and during the job?
Yeah, I would say there's plenty of opportunities to be creative. So I don't do extra things to keep myself creative. There's like enough, there's, I guess, enough things to keep my mind occupied. So I'm constantly thinking about different areas, learning about different things. So I don't worry about that part. But the part that, what was the second part about? I just forgot the question.
No problem. Kind of what keeps you confident while you're pursuing an idea or taking a risk?
Yeah. No, I always say, always listen to the customer. So that's something, like I didn't know that much about the beverage industry. And I say I still probably don't know half of it because of the stage we're in. There's always new things to learn. And I definitely, my perspective about the industry I'm in is really different now than 2 years ago. So you never know everything. And I think that's part of the entrepreneurial journey is you'll find out more as you progress. And the confidence, I think, is partially self-derived. You have to really believe that, you can face the challenge, and that's part self-confidence, and it's also part reaction to what's thrown at you. So by that I just mean, like, we've iterated many times, and that's purely based on data. So I'm always about, like seeing what data's out there, talking to our customers, and figuring out what's working, what's not working, and respond. I am no stranger to iteration. I don't think there's any shame in changing the path if something doesn't work out. It's, I would definitely respond to the data. And I think that gives me confidence to know that, hey, like this is what the customer wants, because the data speaks so. And if something is not what they want, then we'll just ditch it. Yeah, I would say that's, it's, everyone sees that as long as they're constantly, talking to the customer in the startup world and figuring out, pursuing the path that's actually giving them positive response, then it should work in the end.
Great, thank you. So I kind of, speaking of change, how do you expect wildwonder to keep growing and changing in the next couple of years? And along those lines, what are your goals for the company?
Yeah, we definitely want to build a national brand and a bigger platform so that we can actually make more significant impacts on the food industry. So I think the change comes from two perspectives. One is, bringing healthier functional products to market. So like if you think about what's on retail shelves now, they're so full of sugar, artificial ingredients, like we're definitely going healthier, but we could do more. And, maybe it's providing various better for you ingredients in delicious formats that's more accessible. And the other change, is really on the people side. So I do think that there is a diversity issue in all sectors. I used to work in finance. That is definitely not diverse. Tech is not diverse. And same thing with the food industry. And I think that if there's ways to bring more diversity to the market, it doesn't matter which industry, and then I'll know that I've also done my part is something I want to, you know, set examples and also to kind of add more diverse perspectives to the industry.
Thank you. Yeah, that transitions really nicely to my next question. As you know, Women in Economics is a relatively new club at Northwestern, and we're very excited to start supporting female aspiring economists and that sort of thing through our events. So I'm curious, related to diversity, if being a woman has affected your academic and entrepreneurial journey, and if there have been any unexpected or even expected challenges that you faced along the way, personally, or things you observed, like you said, with the lack of diversity in those industries.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes, and I think the stats, you know, speak for themselves. There's, you know, in terms of, for example, like fundraising, right? Like there's low single-digit % of funding going towards female, especially female minority founders, and that's something that everyone recognize. And there, you know, where I used to work at Warburg, you know, out of all the senior people and the partners, there's one female managing director. At Morgan Stanley, you know, like the people on top, you really don't see that many women. So I think just not having representation matters, because, you know, when you look at students or kids, right, they look up to adults to see what's possible, and if they don't think something's possible, then they don't necessarily go for it. So, you know, I'm glad to see like more representation in Hollywood, more representation in media and entertainment, also like in tech, and in food and beverage space as well. There's actually a recent effort to push for BIPOC, you know, founders in food, or BIPOC founded brands in food and beverage. And I'm hoping that's also being done in other industries. I don't know too much about what other industries are doing, but the fact that, you know, in the food industry, people are pushing for that, for shelf space, you know, for partnerships with corporations, I think it's a really good trend. I think there's a lot more we can do, but it definitely, like I haven't thought too much, you know, back when I was a student, I didn't really think too much about what it means to be a female or a minority. But now I do see kind of the impact of lack of diversity is, if you're not talking to someone who's like you, they might not relate as much, they might not trust you as much. So, you know, I guess I'm glad that there's actually a, you know, more female focused club, and like there's more push for I guess female representation in all industries. I do think there's a lot more work to be done.
Yeah, I would say we absolutely agree, and that's why we're excited to keep pushing for that. So thank you. I guess this will be our last question, I think. As a senior, I have to ask if you have any advice for new recent graduates, or on a more personal note, if there's something you would want to tell your past self around the time you were graduating from college.
Yeah, so I would say I placed a lot of emphasis on like my #1 job after graduation, and career is kind of a fluid process and journey, and it's not just about your first job or second job, but like people change jobs all the time, people change career path all the time now. So you know, I was so I remember at Northwestern, you know, graduation was like fairly easy for me. I like didn't really have that many things I was considering. I was very much focused on doing finance and learn, you know, banking, and had secured the job in advance. I would say when I graduated from business school, that was a much harder choice, and I really struggled with that. So I actually took almost a year to decide. Not like a year during my business school time, but like literally a year after. So I, you know, basically traveled around, and I worked, you know, on projects with different startups to figure out what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. And I would just say that, like, don't be afraid to explore. And there's no like wrong job. I think it's just a learning process, it's a journey. And the career, if I think about career as a whole, like it's, you know, as a trajectory, it, you know, one job really doesn't matter too much. I would focus more on, you know, maybe learning a certain skill set, having a really good mentor that you can learn from, and just, you know, figuring out what's the best opportunity to like set yourself up for potentially what you want to do, or at least at a time what you want to do, because I think that's going to change based on, you know, experience. Having tried a few jobs myself, I, you know, definitely I'm not on the path I thought that I was going to be on, and I think that's very common.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and it's good to know that things will work out one way or another. So
yes.
Yeah, well, I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful chatting with you and hearing about how being an econ major has affected all the things, all the cool things that you're doing now. So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. Thanks to everyone who attended. We will be sending out the recording at some point in the next week or so. Make sure to follow Women in Economics on social media. We are, you know, doing all the things to make female economists more successful. So that's all. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks, Rosa. Talk to you soon.
It's really great to meet you. Bye.